Hey, friends. Welcome to Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. I'm also a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids, a recovering lawyer, a Jewish educator and spiritual counselor, and a divorce coach who is committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. Today's episode is called Positive Pathways to Co-Parenting. Sometimes the hardest thing about divorce is our guilt about the kids. We worry about everything from how and when do we tell them to what will it mean for their lives, and especially, how can I co-parent with my ex when we can barely even talk? As many of you know, I've been working to lead co-parents through this tumultuous time through my BEH2O workshop trainings. But I believe that many coaches have the tools to help you navigate these waters. Today's guest is divorce coach Cari D'Angelo. Carrie is a CDC Certified Divorce Coach. She is dedicated to improving the divorce experience, especially for children. Having personally navigated divorce 3 times, first as a teen and then twice as an adult, she brings a unique perspective to her work. Carrie holds a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and has over 20 years of experience working with children and families as a therapist, classroom teacher, and school counselor. She's passionate about keeping the kids first, not in the middle, throughout the divorce process. And her mission is to help families navigate the emotional challenges of divorce with compassion and resilience. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us. You have so much to offer. And I want to start by digging right into who you are and your background. You shared that you've been through the divorce process 3 times. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my first experience with divorce was my parents. I am the youngest of 4. So I was the only one left at home when my parents decided to get divorced. My siblings are 5 and more years older than me. So they were all out of the house. And it was really hard for me. And I felt very caught in the middle. Oftentimes it was, here, give this to your mom. Tell your dad this. So that was my first experience. Not surprisingly, I went on to earn a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, right? Because those 2 events are connected. After I earned my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, I got married to somebody. There was some substance abuse going on in the marriage. He did go to rehab. We were good for a little while. Relapse happened. And I made the decision that I didn't want to stay in the marriage anymore. We didn't have any kids. It was a pretty simple, cut and dry. We sat down at the table. We decided who was getting what. So it was pretty quick. A few years later, met somebody new. We got married. We had a child. And 3 years after our son was born, he said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Now, a little bit of backstory. It was a little rough. It was bumpy. We had been in marriage therapy. We had gone away to a marriage boot camp out of state. But then he said, I don't want to do this anymore. So that was about 6 years ago. We split up, got divorced with a 3-year-old, now a 9-year-old. So that's kind of my personal experience with divorce. I've done it with kids. I've done it without kids. I was a kid. So I think that I do lend a lot of that personal experience, which really can't be learned in a book.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. So many of us who are in this business of divorce coaching decided to enter this field because of the things that were lacking when we went through the process. And I'm really touched by the fact that you had this experience as a teen and you felt what it was like to be pulled in the middle, because very often parents don't really even realize they're doing it. And so having your voice as, well, what if your child is actually feeling X when this happens, can be really eye-opening, sometimes depressing, sad, accusatory. Lots of feelings go through people, but you have that wisdom to help people step out of that trap.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about, let's go to the shift from therapy to coaching, because these are two different helping service providers, but
Right.
there's different philosophies. So tell
Right.
us.
Right. So, I got my master's degree in, I guess I finished that around 2003. And I did that for a few years. And I was seeing a lot of kids in the school system, and I really liked that school system. Kind of, you go to one spot every morning, you're with the same kind of group and all of that. When I was doing therapy, I was out of my trunk. I was knocking on people's doors. If they weren't there, I wasn't seeing anybody.
Mm,
And it was really challenging. So I shifted from therapy to a classroom teacher at the elementary school level, which was great. I loved having that group of 20 kids that I really got to know. I got to know their families. Oftentimes, divorce was shared with me because the student would come in and share that, mom and dad said they're getting a divorce, and they would crumble on their desk. Or sometimes parents would share it with me and wanted me to break the news to the student, which is really inappropriate. But parents don't know. They don't know how to share that with their child. They don't want to do it wrong. And they just don't have any guidance, which is where a divorce coach comes into play, right?
yeah.
Um, when I was a classroom teacher, I did that for about 9 years, and I really missed the counseling side of it. So I went into school counseling, still at the elementary school level, but instead of having 20 kids, I had about 1,000 kids. Big,
Wow.
but I was able to really dig in a little bit more with certain kids. I just didn't have, a lot of those kids I didn't really interact with too much. They didn't really need me, and that's okay. Um, so then I found myself kind of wanting to be more action oriented. And that's where divorce coaching kind of comes into play, right? We
Mm,
take what's going on today, where do you want to go, and how are we going to get there? We're not
right.
really looking into your family of origin, any diagnoses, anything like that. It's very action oriented, results driven. And that's kind of how I see coaching. And I like to get things done. I like checking things off my to-do list. So that's why I went more towards the coaching. I also realized that kids really have no control.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not up to them if they're on time. It's not up to them if they have clean clothes or if they had breakfast, oftentimes, right? But it's up to the adults. So if I could help the adults divorce better, it's just going to trickle down to the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And that's that's really sort of the center of what this conversation is about, positive pathways to co-parenting. And so what we learn, as coaches is that parents struggle with what they do, but then they often step into potholes. And sometimes those potholes are of their own making. You're in communication patterns that have become ingrained in the marriage relationship. And what we say in our BEH2O approach is, we need to take that relationship and put it on a shelf and start from scratch, design a new entrepreneurial relationship in the business of raising the kids. But that's a hard sell.
Mm.
It makes sense to me, and it's using different vocabulary. But when you find your clients, where do you find them at? And also, how do they find you?
So a couple of different ways. Like I have a few different avenues that clients find me. My most exciting one is on Google. When people find me on Google, because I don't pay for any Google ads, but they might Google divorce coach near me and I pop up. I'm in South Florida. Um, or sometimes they find me on Instagram, right? I do a lot of reels. I try to post a lot on Instagram. Sometimes they find me that way. My Instagram handle is coaching_with_Carrie, and that's spelled Cari. I'm also, networking with people. I'm reaching out to parents in my local area. I'm also reaching out to people on LinkedIn. Really, because when I see clients, I either see them on Zoom or I see them on the phone. So just because I'm in South Florida doesn't mean I can't have a client in California or in Georgia.
Right.
So that's really helpful for a lot of people because, as you know, divorce coaches, we're not everywhere, right? I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get back there. But one of the challenges that I've always found is that people don't really know what divorce coaches are or how we help. And they often ask me, what's the difference between what you do and a therapist? So now I have my answer. What is your answer?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that, driven, results oriented, right?
Yeah.
We're going to
Yeah.
take where you're at today and we want to move you forward to whatever your goals might be. The way I see my job as a divorce coach is I want to help people through the process of divorce. I want to help them process those feelings, right? Because when you're feeling things, you cannot think about things. So we have to process those feelings so you can make good decisions through your
Right.
divorce process. I also help connect you with the right professionals. So if you haven't found a family law attorney, then I'm going to recommend 2 or 3 that might be a good fit for you. If you need a lending professional, maybe if you're selling your house, you need something, I have a couple of CDLPs that I can recommend. And the paperwork, right? If you've ever been divorced, there's gobs and mountains of paperwork. I want to help you with the paperwork and stay on top of the paperwork and the timeline so you can move through the divorce process and not get stuck in one of those potholes, right? And then it doesn't move and you've been in the process for 2 years and you're still not at the finish line.
Right.
And then, post divorce, or post judgment, I want to help you do the best you can for your kids
Right.
because your kids didn't pick you as a parent. The kids didn't pick for you to get married or divorced. It's not their fault. So I want to help parents divorce better so they can really, keep their kids first and not in the middle.
Yeah. So that's my original tagline, divorce better.
Yes.
Because it makes sense. Maybe having gone through my own divorce and you have your experience, it's like we know that there are ways to divorce and less good ways to divorce.
Right.
And,
Right.
and no one is doing that on purpose, but
Right.
it's just without guidance, without that listening ear who can really hear what you're concerned about. It's really hard to navigate with clarity.
Right. Right. And when your emotions are heightened and you're in that fight or flight mode, you can't make good decisions. You're not supposed to make good decisions, right? Because you're thinking about survival. That's why when you're being chased by a bear, you shouldn't be trying to solve an algebra problem,
Right.
right?
Right.
And sometimes your body doesn't realize that this is a divorce issue and there is no bear threatening your life, but you're still in that fight or flight mode, right? I joke around with people and I say that, my goal is for my child only to need 6 months of therapy and not 6 years of therapy, because divorce is hard. Divorce can be very messy. We
Yeah.
want to minimize that. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. I'm not saying it's not going to be messy. I'm not saying you're not going to need, a therapist for your child. But let's try to minimize that as much as possible.
Right. Right. No, that's really important. Um, when we talk about how do we create positive pathways to co-parenting, what what do you see as like maybe the top 3 dilemmas parents face and how you approach them.
Yeah. So one of the big things that I see a lot of the time is somehow people have the expectation that the person that you divorced is going to be different than the person that you married.
Hmm.
So if they were a bad communicator when you were married, chances are they're going to be a bad communicator when you're divorced. If
Yeah.
they were late when you were married, chances are they're going to be late when you're divorced. So don't be surprised by that, right? One of my best friends always says, like, don't go to the hardware store looking for bread.
Right.
You're not
Right.
going to find it, right?
Yeah.
So really adjusting those expectations, is one of the big hurdles that I see. Another one is kind of separating out, like, just because this person was a quote unquote bad spouse doesn't make them a bad parent, right?
Okay. So say a little bit more about that.
So, okay, husband and wife, they're married for 10 years, and the husband is, because it always seems to be, the man's fault. But the husband is neglectful. The husband isn't paying attention to the wife. He's not taking her out on dates, blah, 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 whatever. And he ends up having an affair, right? Now, some people would say, oh, he was a bad husband, right? He didn't pay attention to his wife. Then he went out and had this extramarital affair. He's a bad husband. Is he a bad dad? Does he still show up for the kids? Does he care about the kids? Can he do things for the kids? Right. And when you move into that co-parenting space, the neglectful husband and the, adultery, that's the marriage stuff. That doesn't have any impact on the co-parenting, or at least it shouldn't. Right.
Right. So it's interesting though, because I know that in my experience, you know, women who find out that their husbands were unfaithful, think of it as being unfaithful to the family. It's not just unfaithful to you, but the family depended on that core relationship. So if the spouse was willing to put that whole relationship at risk, then doesn't that make a judgment about their parenting skills? And so one of the things I try to do is to take the judgment language out, right? Like, is he a bad husband, or was he a husband who just didn't meet the needs or the job requirements of husband, right? And so there were certain job requirements there, but there are different job requirements in parenting.
Mm-hmm.
What I've seen in some cases is that after the divorce, the husband who was never around all of a sudden finds a way to be around and finds a way to build different relationships with the children.
Right.
So the question is, how do we coach the spouse who has experienced the negative aspects of their co-parent as in the marriage? How do we coach that spouse to shift their mindset?
Right.
And that, I think, is a big task.
Yes. Yes. And it is, and it I think for me and my experience is, like, we need to validate those feelings, right? Yes, he cheated. It was terrible. You're heartbroken. Your whole dream of, 2.5 kids and a golden retriever with the white picket fence is up in flames. And that's terrible. And you really need to sit with that for a little bit to validate that, right?
Right.
But then moving on, a lot of times what I find is I have a lot of clients that are like, no, but he's a good parent or she's a good parent, right? Um, the other thing is when people go from, married to divorced and co-parenting, is, like you were saying, it forces that other parent to really step up,
Right.
because you don't have the other, mom is not making the turkey sandwiches. If dad doesn't make them, they don't get made.
Right.
Um, so it
Right.
forces dad to do that kind of stuff. And I hear a lot of times, like, well, he doesn't even know how to make my kids lunch. Can he learn?
Right.
He doesn't even know the teacher's name. Could he learn? Like,
Right.
is there a GPS to the school that we can use?
Exactly. So on that note, and leaning into the pathways, we're going to take a quick 30-second break to hear from our sponsors. So we are back with Cari D'Angelo on Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter. We've been talking about positive pathways to co-parenting and how Carrie's experience of having been a child of divorce and then her own divorces has really informed how she coaches her clients and what her experience, which is not something we learn in books, can really do to support clients going through this in their own lives. So where we left off, Carrie, you were talking about how sometimes one co-parent, often the mother, will be like, well, he doesn't know how to do this or he doesn't know how to do that. And you offer the opportunity for that person to consider, well, maybe they can learn. And let's shift our mindset to have more of an outward mindset than that internal self-protective mindset. So tell us a little more about that sort of positive pathway you offer to your clients.
Yeah. So it's interesting because if you've ever gone hiking or, gone to a park or anything like that, and a lot of times there is a pathway, right? Like through the woods, and you follow the path. Well, a long time ago, there was no path. The path is there because many people have traveled it. They've broken branches out of the way, or they cleared big rocks or something like that, and the pathway is there. When the pathway starts, it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's not smooth. It's bumpy. There's things in your way. It's the same thing with, the neural pathways in our brain that we have to rework, right? So this old pathway of he doesn't know where the school is, he doesn't know how to make the lunch, he doesn't know the teacher's name. If you're going from that pathway that's like really grooved in there and you're trying to make a new pathway, it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be challenging. But baby steps are still steps, right? So you do little things, and you ease your way into it. And you give your co-parent the opportunity to step up, right? And not only is that good for you, because you get a little bit of a break, right? It's good for your child. It's good for the co-parent. The co-parent is finally like, oh my gosh, I can do this, right? Because chances are, if he's never made a turkey sandwich, he's probably thinking, I've never made a turkey sandwich,
Yeah.
But and then it gives your child the opportunity to have a better relationship with this co-parent, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you've been the primary parent. Maybe you've done 80% of the work the whole time. Well, now you can kind of step back and your child has this opportunity to get to know and build the relationship with your co-parent, which is their other parent.
Right. And they need that relationship. I mean, one thing that is often hard for divorcing people to recognize is that their co-parent really loves their kids. Like whatever challenges there were in the marriage, they manifested, they came out in certain ways. But if we start from the shared value that both parents love the children, both parents want the children to feel supported, then we're going from the why, right? Why are we in this effort in the first place? And if we can shift that mindset to giving your co-parent the recognition that, okay, I know that you love our kids. I might not like the way you do what you do, but I'll start with, I know that you love them, and then we'll figure out how to make this a success.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you another question, because I have come across clients who they have one parent who is not trying to make it a success, but is actually trying to sabotage the other parent. And have you come across that? And then how do you coach the parent who's trying to do their best?
So unfortunately, sometimes people are on different pages, right?
Mhm.
And yes, we can all agree we love these kids, but I think the sky is blue and you think it's red. Um, and that's going to happen, right? Because if we all agreed on everything, we probably wouldn't be divorced.
Yeah.
um, so a lot of times with that client who has a co-parent that might be high conflict or just not really amenable to what's going on, we focus on what we do have control over, right?
Mhm.
Not talking poorly about the co-parent, about, still encouraging your child to spend time with the co-parent. You just kind of have to adjust your expectations and your input or output even to know that this co-parent is going to give you this, right? It goes back to that, don't go to the hardware store looking for bread, right?
Right.
If he's always late and he's late again, I should almost expect that he's going to be late, right? I shouldn't expect him to be on time. So that's kind of on me with my expectations, right? And trying to keep that communication really focused on the kids,
Mhm.
not, oh, well, I was out of town. You didn't even ask me about my trip. Well, the
Right.
trip was with the kids, so the trip is not on the table for discussion, you know? Just keeping those expectations really clear, keeping the communication clear, um, and then adjusting if you need to.
Yeah. I mean, we always have to be ready to pivot,
Right.
right? Because we don't know what's going to come our way. And what I try and stress with my clients is, um, when you communicate, uh, I I have several different acronyms, but one is, of course, the BIF, which is brief, informative, factual, and firm. And the other we learned in coaching training, which is CIC, which is concise, informative, and civil. It's very simple. And and when you're communicating, you you don't have to share everything you're thinking.
Right.
You just have to share the necessary information. And I have found with my clients that both of those acronyms have been extraordinarily helpful as a pathway toward better co-parenting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because when they don't add the second clause or the because you're always late or I should have expected you to be late, like the criticism that comes at the end
Right.
when you just use different language, and it can be, we also use something called I feel statements. You know,
Right.
I feel disappointed when the kids aren't picked up at time on time because I value on timeness, or I want the kids to feel confident that someone's there for them. Like
Right.
whatever it is, you find the words. And that's something that, is part of my technique. So in terms again of another positive pathway, what would you say is your technique when there are real communication issues between the co-parents?
Yeah. I try to really make sure that they're focused on the kids and nothing else,
Mhm,
keeping that communication brief, factual, taking the feeling out of it. Um,
mhm.
even using ChatGPT is a great little hack because you can
Wow.
type in what you want to say and then say like make it shorter, make it more factual, take the feeling out. You really and it can customize what you want before you send that message, right?
Right.
I know that there's some apps out there that parents use, and those help as well. But if you're not paying for those apps, ChatGPT is a great free hack. And also, like I said, just those expectations.
Right.
And like you said, you don't have to say everything that you're thinking.
Right. I remember when I was going through my divorce, I always had the expectation that I knew he could do better, right? I knew that he could be different than this, but that's not a strategy, right? That what we need to do is recognize where we are, like instead of looking at hopes or dreams of how your co-parent could be or should be, we can look at this is the situation right now. How do I take this situation and move forward in a positive way? And
Right.
it could be a subtle shift, it could be a dramatic shift, but it is a way to reframe how you're experiencing the co-parenting.
Yeah. And I think that's true, that reality versus the fantasy, right?
Mhm.
Well, you have the potential to be better. You have the potential to be on time. But reality is this is what it is. Like this is the package that I've been given, that is late or
Right,
whatever. But this is reality. So you really have to focus on reality and not the potential or well, you can do better. Well, that's not what's happening right now.
right.
So, focusing on that. I also wanted to say, kind of backtracking a little bit, is I really do believe that parents bring different things to the table.
Mhm.
I can do a lot of things. I can't do everything. My child needs his father to add those things that I can't do to his life. So even though you were doing 80% of whatever it was before divorce, you don't have to, number one, and you really can't. Different parents fill different roles. Moms and dads do different things, and kids need all of it,
Right.
right? Kids are more successful when they have more adults in their life that are pouring into them.
Mhm.
Mom, dad, grandparents, teachers, coaches, all of that stuff. So let's get as many people to pour into and love our kids as we can, and not cut anybody out.
Right. And ultimately we can't cut out the parent because the co-parent is our child's parent.
Correct.
So we need to acknowledge that that is the reality. And so moving forward in acceptance as opposed to fighting the reality is really essential for co-parents to recognize that we want the child to be at the center of all our conversations, and the child's needs are central, which
Mhm.
is different than putting the child in the middle.
Right.
Like when we center the child versus putting them in the middle, it's really important.
Right.
Um, and it's also really hard because parents feel a tug of war with their own hearts there over, are they going to love that parent more? They're going to love me. And that's one of the unspoken things that people don't talk about. But how can we support our clients to recognize that it's not about who they love more because they love both,
Right.
and let's enhance that.
Yeah. And even beyond that, when step parents are brought into the mix, right? So mom and dad get a divorce, dad has a new girlfriend, maybe they get married. Now there's a stepmom. Mom feels like, oh my gosh, I've been replaced, right? But parents, hear me loud and clear. There is no replacement for mom. There is no replacement for dad. Everybody serves their own role. And like I was saying about all those adults that can pour into your kid, you should view those step people as more adults that are going to help guide your child, pour into your child, teach them different things. Maybe I don't know how to crochet and stepmom does. Maybe I know how to play softball, but stepmom doesn't.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we're better together.
So this is a great piece of advice, is that the more adults who can pour love into your child, the better off they are. So how do we let go of our competitiveness and look at it as a potential gift, right? It's a potential gift, even though there's always a tension. You can't take it away and you can't not acknowledge it. But if we can look at it as every relationship our child has is going to contribute to their fuller, more complete life.
Right.
And I'm saying that like very thoughtfully, knowing that like my ex-husband is remarried and my children have a different relationship with her. But yet, and I will admit this freely, that sometimes it's hard when they talk about the fun things they're doing with the other, and they call her a step parent. And yet my ex got married when my kids were already in their 20s. So I don't think of it that way, but they do. And so there needs to be a way for acceptance while respecting the challenge that's inside.
Right. And I think, again, that goes back to that pathway in your brain, right? Or the pathway in the woods. It's hard. And like, be validated that it's hard, but it's not impossible.
Right.
Right. And it's going to take practice, and it's going to take perseverance to create that pathway that this person is not a threat. This person is it's a good thing. And there's going to be things that they're going to come to you for, and not the other, step parent or whoever it might be.
Right.
And there might be things that they go to the step parent for and they don't come to the parent for.
Yeah.
I think that everybody can kind of contribute. And when people can work together in a perfect world, when people can work together, whether it's, parents, step parents, stepdad and dad are working together for the good of the child, the kid sees that.
Yeah.
They feel more supported.
100%.
And you have the support, right? You have other adults that you can be like, oh my gosh, they came home late again. Can you please talk to them why it's important to be on time?
Right.
Or whatever.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
So Carrie, this has been an amazing conversation. And I know we have so much more that we can talk about. I love your backstory. I love your purpose. Tell us, how can my audience reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is spelled Cari, C-A-R-I. And my email is Cari, C-A-R-I, at coachingwithcari, CARI.com. So that's my email. You can email me. I typically schedule a free meet and greet, AKA consult, where we can kind of see if we're a good fit. You can also check out my website, which is coachingwithcari.com. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. My Instagram handle is coaching_with_Carrie, spelled C-A-R-I. I try to post on there, 5 days a week, plus stories. So you can find a lot of really good, helpful content. And if you don't need it, you can always pass it on to somebody else that might need it.
Yeah. I find our best referral sources are people who know us in different contexts and trust us, because perhaps the biggest fear is not being able to trust people.
Right.
And the coach is a person whose only focus and only stake in the whole process is helping you build your future and get through the divorce and learn the tools you need for positive parenting.
Right. To be successful in the long run, right? Because with our kids, we're in it for the long game. We're not playing for 6 months. I'm not even playing for 6 years. I'm playing for the long haul. Right now, my child is 9, so I'm building the foundation of our relationship.
Right.
Because in 20 years, when he is well out of the house, I still want to have that relationship with him.
And our relationships shift and morph and change. So if you feel like you've made some mistakes and you don't know if you can get out of the way of that paradigm, life moves forward. And if you keep looking forward, you're going to be able to make shifts that will shift the relationship.
Yep.
So that's something for all of us to keep in mind. That
Yes.
nothing is static. Nothing is going to be this way forever. There's only today and moving forward.
Right.
So
This too shall pass. If it's good, if it's bad, this too shall pass.
yes, that is a great way for us to end. So thank you for being an awesome guest. For my audience, you can always find me at Lisa at lzlcoaching.com or at my website, www.lzlcoaching.com. And you can also book a free 30-minute consult with me and see if we're the right fit. I like having resources in every field. So having Carrie as a resource in Florida and someone who could work throughout the country is a great part of my toolkit. So thank you again, and looking forward to seeing my audience next time on Dishing on Divorce.